Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar focused on APM for performance testers using AppDynamics. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive an email with the link when it's available. There will be a QA session that will be handled electronically. You will see a QA panel on your Zoom interface, so please enter your questions there, and our presenters will address them during the Q&A portion of today's webinar. So our presenters today will be myself, Todd Williams. I'm the APM Account Executive. We've also got Alex Darby, who is our APM Services Manager, and Alex Weiss, who is our Solutions Architect. From an agenda perspective, today we'll be walking through an Orosi overview, and then we'll keep it brief there and then get into the meat of the conversation today around APM and testing and the Better Together story as to why you should be leveraging APM in your testing processes. And then we'll walk through how that will actually come into play with the use of AppDynamics, and then Neoload will be the Neoload product will be the QA product that we've showcased today, and then actually do the demo of the tools in action, and then leave some time for some Q&A afterwards as well. So as a quick overview of Orosi, those that are not familiar with us, we are headquartered here in Atlanta, Georgia, but we've got a nationwide presence. And we've been in business for over 17 years, and we really started and cut our teeth on the QA and performance testing side of the world. And as our business developed and as we saw our customers continue to adopt a DevOps model, we continue to enhance our offering as well. So you'll see the continuous testing piece off to the right. That is, again, where Orosi really got its start. But you can see that through the rest of these circles, the other practice areas that we're able to provide, with DevOps being the cornerstone of it all. So whether it's APM, application security, integration products, continuous testing, Orosi can help in any of those in any of those point areas, but also our really bread and butter is being able to consult and provide DevOps services as a whole, no matter where you are on your DevOps journey. And so within the overall strategy, as that being a key area of expertise for Orosi, we also are able to provide the tools that help you scale and automate your DevOps processes. So today, again, it's focused on AppDynamics, and we'll show the Neoload product from Neoload. But as you can see on the screen here, we've got many other strategic partners that help our customers execute their DevOps practices through the use of the technology. And then as for bringing two of those circles together from the previous slide, the APM and the continuous testing, today's webinar will focus on APM and performance testing. And in the end, we want you to walk away with seeing the benefits and realizing the value of using APM in performance testing for benefits such as getting a granular view into your system's performance under load, being able to dive down to the code level issues to fix issues faster, that's just ultimately driving down that mean time to resolution, and then ultimately, like many of our customers that are leveraging this in practice today, reduce the amount of issues that actually make it into production to begin with. So those are the benefits of the practice that we're about to dive deeper into. And with that, I will turn it over to Alex Darby to start the AppDynamics portion.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Todd. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I look forward to showing you guys more about AppDynamics and Neoload and how those two tools complement one another. The first screen we want to look at is those of you who have AppDynamics are probably very familiar with this screen, and those who are not would like to tell you what you're actually looking at. This is what's called an application flow map, and once you start your test, and if you are testing something that's instrumented with AppDynamics, you will be able to see your test flow through the environment, the entire environment. So you will be able to see how your test is flowing and hitting different tiers, how it's reaching out to databases, what databases it's talking to, other applications that it might be possibly interacting with, whether it's supposed to or not, and be able to really track and monitor the application as it goes forward from a graphical viewpoint like this, in addition to the information that you're getting in from Neoload. So basically the way this works is once you instrument AppDynamics into your environment and load hits that environment through your test, it tags each transaction that goes through with a GUID and then follows it through the application, through the environment as a whole that's related to this particular application, and then reports that information back to the controller. So you are getting a real-time information on what's happening during your test. So for performance testing, this is very good in order to see how the traffic is going and how it's interacting with one another, as well as AppD watches every transaction that goes through the environment and during your test, and gives you information on that on your transactions. The next one here, we dive a little bit more into the application flow map. To the right, we can actually see the transactions that are being generated by your test and which ones are normal, which ones are slow, very slow, and stall and errors. You may ask yourself, okay, how does it know what's slow and what's not slow? You can actually tell it through a setting inside AppDynamics what is the threshold that it's going to be, right? So let's say you have an SLA that says login can't be more than 3 seconds, right? So you can actually go in and look at that particular transaction and say, okay, I want login. If it's over 3 seconds, I want this to be a very slow transaction, right? Or if I want at 2 seconds, I want it to be slow transaction, and it'll make sure that it classifies at that. So you can do it statically by doing it that way, or you can do it dynamically, in which that you change the threshold to for it to look at a certain amount of time. Like let's say a certain amount of time over the test period. You could say maybe the last 2 hours, last hour, whatever the average response time is, and then if it goes up above that for a certain amount of, let's say, standard deviations over that, then let's say 3 standard deviations over the average transaction time frame, or 2 standard deviations, whatever it might be, then it will show up as slow or very slow. And then you can actually go in here and you can see very quickly, you know, what's normal, what's not normal. And if you want to look at what's slow or very slow, you just click on those little blue guys and they'll take you to that information, showing you which transactions are not cooperating for you for this test.
And this is a few words about the Neoload and the tool that we're going to be looking at today, which is called Neoload. And some of you may be familiar with it, but some of you might be using a different tool for performance testing. But in general, what Alex just showed throughout the monitoring solutions such as AppDynamics, usually and traditionally this such tool is used in production monitoring. Because in production, you have all the traffic that is happening. You can see all the users and all the transactions that are happening. But in testing environment, that is not happening by itself. And so if you to deploy the application into the staging environment and let it sit there, unless you have a lot of users that will be using it at that moment, it's probably going to be invisible inside the AppDynamics, so AppDynamics environment and all the information that it would be able to produce and show to you, all the analytics and all the visibility, it's going to be empty. So you need something to drive the user load towards the testing environment, so you could actually understand what is the level of resiliency of your application and of the entire system, the capacity of it and stability, and all those aspects are tested throughout the performance testing, which is a standard for majority of our customers and for majority of folks who are responsible for testing. So Neoload is one of those tools that is capable of doing all those things and is capable to be deployed in all types of environments. So in traditional on-premise environments and SaaS environment, is capable of running in the cloud and testing against the cloud applications and cloud testing environments, and also one of the main aspects of it is capable of being a part of your Agile and DevOps process, where it can be driven by API calls and also utilize other systems' APIs, and in order to drive user load towards the application and provide, therefore, also metrics for AppDynamics. So Neoload has been on the market for a while, and just a few words about it. This company has emerged as being a competitor to traditional load runner environments, and it has been on the market for a while now and is considered a stronger tool in many aspects, ease of use, less need for scripting, but also because it's very flexible and easy to maintain. That's one of the main strengths of this tool is the ability to maintain it really easy. So all the tasks, whenever something changes, can be updated pretty much very easily, and you don't need to rescript everything. So, and of course, it's available globally with all the abilities for training, services, consulting, and helping migrate from one tool to another. This is Neoload, and we're going to show today how it integrates with AppDynamics. So now the conversation about the integration between those is kind of like what I just mentioned. The ability to indicate whether transaction of the system is underperforming, and the first indication of that underperformance is going to be on the user sides, meaning the transaction response times are going to grow up, and users will experience of the application performing slower for them, so longer wait times after you click submit, after you fill in fields, web pages or mobile applications not producing the content and making users wait. And of course, users today are becoming less and less patient. So if the transaction did not complete in 3 seconds, then it's pretty much over, and the users are going to move on to a different application, or will start accumulating dissatisfaction with the application itself. And Neoload is capable of producing that type of scenario in testing environment, allowing, of course, everybody to find out that it is going to happen in production, and of course drive the metrics into AppDynamics so it could perform the analytics. And especially it's important in testing environment, because in production mode, the resolution teams and triaging teams are working in a little bit different mode. So in a testing environment, you have to try and get people on board to help you find out what the issue is. And it's especially important in agile environments where performance testing might be run at early stage of the application development or module development or feature development. And when that's happening, it's very important to provide specific issues that are happening in terms of application performance directly to developers, so they could be able to fix it right away instead of setting up a war room and trying to figure out what's happening. So that's one of the biggest values of integration between Neoload and AppDynamics in this case, because AppDynamics is capable of producing the errors all the way down to the code level. And you could probably say more about this than I can.
Yeah, so one of the big things is the end-to-end visibility, right? So when you're testing with a performance tool like Neoload, you're getting a certain amount of metrics. You're monitoring certain things, but you're not going to get the in-depth information that you're going to get at AppDynamics from Neoload. It's just not built that way. So that's why they're very good in complementing in one another to be able to see the whole test in its entirety. And not only from a transaction standpoint and average response time, and if there's errors and what the CPU is doing, but also, what's going on inside the application. You don't have to have an SME sitting there with you to be able to show you logs or to let you know how things are going or whatever, to be able to research things. And then being able to dive down and analyze what's happening quickly to be able to help you with your testing. So that's the really big thing that I wanted to say about the two tools and how they complement one another in performance testing and QA. And Alex, I'm sorry that I didn't introduce you earlier. So this is Alex Weiss. You just kind of jumped in here because I didn't introduce
That's all right.
him.
That's all right. I think Todd did a good job of introducing us both at the beginning. So I'm Alex Weiss. I'm the solution architect for Orosi, and my responsibility is pretty much to help customers find out about new applications and new ways to utilize their existing applications. Of course, expand the usage of those tools throughout the DevOps processes and instrument additional parts of those processes whenever is needed. So quick word here about how this is actually done. I mean, in terms of architecture and theory, what is that connection between load tool and APM, Neoload and AppDynamics for this purpose specifically. So AppDynamics, as we mentioned, monitors the entire server infrastructure and all the applications and all the modules running on those servers, and Neoload is driving the content requests towards the front end of the application, or if we're talking about different protocols, can do API load testing, et cetera, et cetera. But the main idea is that Neoload will create virtual users scenarios that are going to send requests to the servers, get responses, analyze those responses, and tell you, well, I had a good experience, I had a bad experience, low response times, long response time, etc. The way that this is working, it is also going to send, has the ability and is sending transaction markers to the AppDynamics. So when AppDynamics is opening up the map, it is capable of recognizing transactions because Neoload is modifying the headers of the request in order to add their AppDynamics API content. And therefore, AppDynamics is capable of finding out those specific transactions, because without those, AppDynamics will just see a bunch of requests. And in load testing, performance testing, we want to combine and group some of those requests into a single transaction, such as, order tires or create an order or something like that. So that is what Neoload sends to the AppDynamics in terms of administrative data as well. And in addition to that, it is capable of receiving content from AppDynamics, things that has been on the market for quite a while now, but specifically the infrastructure utilization. So for every node that exists there in the application, AppDynamics will send back to Neoload CPU utilization, memory utilization, disk utilization, etc. So these are the hardware infrastructure metrics that Neoload is going to be able to receive from AppDynamics. That's kind of how it works in theory, and we're going to be able to show that a little bit further down the road. Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alex. So one of the things I wanted to kind of dive into is to be able to discuss how it can help you solve issues, or at least find root cause issues during a test while the test is going on, to be able to give the SMEs the information that they need. So usually in testing, you have a person or persons that are running and monitoring the test from within the testing tool like Neoload. As things start to go south and the transactions start to get slower or errors start to increase, you begin to react by looking at the testing tool's logs to see if there's anything that's jumping out at you. Sometimes there is, and you can fix it on the fly, especially if it's like a script issue, but if it's not a script issue and it's coming from the application side, sometimes it's not as readily available to you on what's going on. So once you get to that point to where you have either made an educated guess on what's happening, or you've got some information around some logs, maybe you page the on-call person to the performance bridge, or you decide, well, it's not that big of a deal right now, we'll just open a ticket for it later, only to be either on the call or the resource that has been assigned the ticket say that this issue is not being caused by their service. So now either you're paging someone else, or you're re-signing the ticket, or you're asking them to re-sign the ticket. So there's this constant kind of back and forth that happens sometimes during testing. And this is, and using AppDynamics is something that can help prevent that, right? So I wanted to talk about how we can do that and the information that you can give to them. So we can get immediate and automated code level diagnostics as one of the things that Alex was mentioning. So with this, this is where AppDynamics is going to fix those problems, right, to where you're going back and forth. It uses highly advanced monitoring capabilities to dive deep into an issue as it is occurring during the test. So when you see the transaction starting to blow up, you find the transaction in AppD, and you start the 1, 2, 3 steps to get to the root cause, right? So you can click on there's several different ways to do that. One of them is you can click on the business transaction list. You find your transaction that's causing you your problem on your Neoload side. You see it in the AppD side. You double click on it, and then you can select the transaction snapshot tab. And in the transaction snapshot tab, you're going to be able to pick which snapshot is more along the lines of what you're seeing. So basically what happens with snapshots is that they will automatically generate when anything's slow or very slow or errored, which is only the things that we're interested in, especially in performance testing. If something's slowed down or you're getting a bunch of errors, you can go in, click on a specific call that the transaction was making, and you can dive into it. And this is where we're able to start separating away from the information that we're getting from Neoload into the information that AppDynamics is going to be able to give you more drilled down kind of back-end application-specific information. So with that, let's talk a little bit more about how you can possibly go through and compare versions, right? So let's say usually you're doing some sort of test on a build or a version that's going to be released, and you know, we're doing this in test environment, and we want to make sure that everything's in line with what we were looking at before, right? So you can use AppDynamics to do quick release comparisons for side-by-side using the power of their dashboards, and their dashboards are very powerful. So you can show one release in one part, and the new and the next focusing in on the metrics the business cares about, right? So here we see that we can see the load was very similar to one another, whether or not errors were occurring. Inside AppDynamics, you have health rules that you can create for things that you want to know about and see that the application is having some problems. You can put that information in there to see was it healthy during the test or not, and then you can show the overall application response time while you were doing your test. From the last time you tested your 4.4 to when you're testing your new 4.5 release that's going out, you know, next week, whatever the case might be. So then you can also not just overall application response time, but specifically those key business transactions that you know there were changes made to, that you know that, you know, new code was delivered to it, and you want to know specifically how are these transactions behaving now compared to how they behaved last time. So you can put those two things side by side and be able to make heads or tails of what's going on, be able to pinpoint things, knowing if, you know, things are way out of whack. And they also make for great reporting as well when you need to report back to the business how things were looking. It's a very, very easy way for the key holders to look at it and say, you know, this is good. This is a good release, or this is bad. We need to work on it. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about transaction snapshots. All right, so with transaction snapshots, we see here the actual exception that was causing the errors in your test. All right, so when you pull that up, you can see the details of the errors, and it'll tell you exactly what it is. I know sometimes you will get that already in inside Neoload, but you'll also be able to make comparisons to ensure that this is the same error that you're seeing, and make sure that all the dots are connecting before you start diving in deeper to where possibly it might be coming from. Another part is the code level, right? So being able to bring up a transaction snapshot and see the code, the actual class and method, and the line number in the code where this is occurring is very powerful. So you can send this information, to an application owner, to a developer, and say, this is where the problem is happening. There's no question. There's not a, well, it's not us. Actually, it is you, because I have the proof here to say that it was your application. It was this line in this code that caused the slowdown. We see here that this was taking, over almost 6 seconds to complete, and taking up 93% of the overall call that was going through for this particular transaction. And then we can see that the little guy on the right there, it says async activity. Those are your exit calls and threads. So we know by looking at that we can see that this was involved in an exit call. So as we pull that up, we see the information about the exit call. We see the name, we see the type, the class, and we see that there was a JDBC call that had that particular SQL query that was causing the problem. It was 4.5 seconds of the overall of everything that was going through to that exit call. So now not only do we know the code that was causing the problem, but now we also know the SQL query that was causing the problem specifically, and we can send that information to the DBA or whatever, what you put in ServiceNow, whatever the case might be, in order to show that this is what's happening, this is the information that we were seeing, and rather than just this transaction was slow, we were getting this error or whatever the case might be. So it empowers you to be able to do more analysis to help these guys to be able to get to the problem faster, and it makes your performance testing even more vital to where they know they're going to get really good information back from you guys, and they're not chasing white rabbits down a hole. Outside of the business transaction snapshot, you can pull up errors and exceptions that are related to the transactions. You can see how many exceptions were going through during your test, and really see which ones they were, what tier it was in, what business transaction it was associated to, and be able to, give that full stack to someone and be able to give that information over there so they can start diving into it immediately and going through the process of finding the problem and resolving the problem. Right? Even though AppDynamics doesn't say this is how you fix the problem, it says this is the problem, this is the source of the issue. So that makes it much more powerful. You don't have to be an SME. You don't have to know everything about the application, even though you might. You don't have to be. Anybody that comes in that maybe they're new to your team, you're training them, they can go off and do this stuff very quickly and be able to give value much faster out of the gate for those that are doing performance testing, and be able to enhance your own skill sets, being able to do things and find things faster and be able to share that information with the business or the customer that you're testing for. All right, so demo time. Let me switch my sharing here so you guys can see what we're going to look at. Okay, let's see that. All right. Okay, so here is Contact Card application, something we're running load against right now, and we see immediately that we've got some issues going on with server health. We see we have one critical health rule that's violating. That may not necessarily coincide with what you're seeing as far as, these health rules have certain thresholds that they hit, right? So we can go in and look at the server health and see, okay, what is this issue? What's happening here? And we can see that the overall disk space available is too low. Now maybe you're getting that information on your end, and maybe you're not. It just depends on what you have set up and the monitors and things of that nature. But once again, we're finding things right out of the bat just by pulling up the application flow map and looking and seeing what's happening. So, but usually what you'll want to do is you'll want to be able to coincide the transactions that you're seeing inside the test and correlate them to the business transactions that you're seeing inside AppDynamics, right? So, like Alex was saying earlier, that you can create a way for AppDynamics to be able to automatically name dynamically the transactions that are happening within inside your test. And to do this, basically, you're just going to tell AppDynamics that you want it to be able to name the transactions by the header. So when the header comes in, you'll be able to see that it's load test. That was the name that I gave it. And then everything after that is the header that's coming through. So we see that TO3_Logitech keyboard is the name of the transaction that's inside Neoload. So we can make that direct correlation. Because out of the box, AppDynamics does it, names them differently based on URI per servlet. And the URI segments may be different, and more than likely it's going to be different than what you've named your transaction inside your test. So to ensure that you are making that correlation, this is a fantastic way to be able to go back and forth between different tabs and see what's going on while the test is happening, and to see if you have this particular, let's say, Logitech keyboard is causing you a problem, right? So then you can double click on that guy, and usually it'll come right up and show you here the dashboard, but you can go to transaction snapshots immediately and be able to see, okay, here are all of this is the most setup of the most recent, and we can see that these guys were slow. Anything yellow is slow. The blue guys mean that you have a full call graph, and I'm going to show you what that is in just a minute from the transaction snapshot, and the gray ones mean that you don't. Okay, so you will get a lot of information, but you won't get every single piece of information. Okay, and the ones that are green here, I said that it does it automatically through whether it's slow, very slow, or errored. The green ones are periodically. So periodically, AppDynamics will take a snapshot, and you'll be able to compare a healthy transaction with a non-healthy transaction. So here we have, if we dive into here, we can see, let's pick a different one. This one didn't give me what I wanted. All right. So we can go in here and we can see that automatically AppDynamics has found an issue, right? It believes that this method is what's causing your problem. All right, so and usually that is the number one is usually where the issue is happening. So as we see here, we see that 41 seconds or 100% of the time is being spent on this guy. Obviously that's fast, but let's say it wasn't, right? Let's say it was over 3 seconds or whatever the case might be, it would tell you here, where that was and what you were looking for. If there were any errors, you would find them here. It also isolates the information for you here to show you the slow calls. So that way, if you wanted to, you could actually skip the call graph. But the call graph gives you really a visual to make sure that, how it was flowing through, what was being executed in the application at the time, how it was flowing through the application, and what those particular calls were. Were they service? Were they struts? Were they POJOs? And what the channels were of those. If there were any SQL calls or remote service calls that were slow, you would have them in here. And then lastly, we see what was going on at the time of the server during the snapshot. Tells you exactly when the snapshot was taken and shows you the trend of what was going on during load beforehand. It shows you the CPU, memory, all that kind of good stuff. So it gives you an idea of where exactly during the test that it took place. All right, so that's the main part of it. Once again, you get your end-to-end visibility here. This is a very simple test, but it gives you your response time for the application as a whole, any errors if they're happening, and then you can go through and click on these guys, like I said before. So Alex, that's what I have for AppD. You want to show them Neoload?
Yes, please. Let me share my screen now. Let's see, stop sharing, Alex. So now I can. And let's see if you guys can see this. So that is the Neoload GUI. It has the controller, designer, and load generator in one. Of course, it can work in a more distributed architecture where you have multiple load generators either in the cloud or on-premise and distribute the load evenly or based on any model that you want. But the main thing that I wanted to show you guys today is how easy it is to instrument the APM within Neoload, which is really a breakthrough from the testing perspective, because you don't have to spend time on putting headers inside the scripts. Essentially, in order to instrument Neoload test with ability to integrate with AppDynamics or other APMs, all you got to do is inside your design panel, you go to advanced section, pull out an APM component and drag it into your action. And in here, all you got to do is provide the name of the application that you want to work with and your AppDynamics credentials. So because AppDynamics, most cases today, I think, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but is used as a SaaS option where you have the controller set up in the cloud environment, and all the agents are instrumented on your applications, either in the cloud or on the Docker environment or on-premise. But that's all you got to do, right? You just provide your AppDynamics accounts and credentials. And that's as easy as how to connect your test to the AppDynamics environment. And then one additional aspect to it is actually setting up the ability to send contents of AppDynamics to AppDynamics from this particular test. So what it does here is essentially parses all the actions, all the transactions within your test, and these are here on the left, and then basically all you got to do is select checkbox that says enable AppDynamics information, and that immediately starts sending, when the test starts, all the information to AppDynamics. And as a result, what you get in the results, in the runtime, besides the regular transaction response times, measurements, and all the other components of the load test, results and metrics that you're containing and connecting to, you can also get the external data, and that is coming from AppDynamics. So usually you will need some time to wait until the application runs, and then you get all the content in here, and that's pretty much it. So that's how easy it is to instrument your load test in Neoload with connectivity to your APM tools. So you don't have to go and ask your APM guys to set anything up for you. All you got to do is put the instrumentation on the target machines where the applications are living within the staging environment, and then run the regular performance test towards it with a little bit of a scenario modification in the Neoload itself. And that's pretty much it. So,
okay,
Alex,
great.
I think, yep, thank you. You guys can go back to our original presentation. There we go.
All right. So basically, to sum up, Neoload and AppD bring end-to-end visibility for you to be able to see, every aspect of the test and the application under test, to the presentation layer, the logic layer, and the data layer. And then here we've got some information around where you can get the information on how to integrate this for yourself, and then the integration for Neoload on GitHub download, as well as if you want to start an AppDynamics trial to see how you can do this in your own labs, in your own performance environments.
Yeah.
And of course, oh, go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, of course, you can reach out to Orosi directly as well. This is an area of expertise of ours. Obviously, as you heard from both Alex White and Alex Darby, we've got a strong history and a lot of experience in helping our customers kind of bring their APM tools left into the testing processes. So we'd love to help you guys out as well. Whether it's through the partnership. Obviously, this is more imminently and focused on the AppDynamics side of things, and certainly that's a key focus area for us. But we're also able to help on any of the testing side, overall DevOps strategy, whatever it might be. So feel free to reach out if we can help.
Excellent. Thanks, Todd.
So, and with that, we've got some time for some Q&A. So again, the way that you're able to do so within the Zoom chat itself is at the bottom, there should be a Q&A section in which you're able to type in any questions that you've got. And I'm sure Alex and Alex will be happy to discuss.
The two Alexes. Anything?
Actually, yeah, we do. We've got one. So actually, we've got two now. So one is coming and it says, "I'm seeing Neoload here. We use a different testing tool. Can we still benefit using AppD if we don't have Neoload?"
Yeah. So I'll take that one.
Go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
So, yeah, of course, the question definitely can use a different load tool because, I mean, the premise of a load tool is be able to send requests to application servers, and AppDynamics has an open API that allows you to send these requests that are automatically predefined within Neoload, but you can create those in any load tool and send those requests to AppDynamics and mark the headers of the requests that are being sent as part of the integration to AppDynamics to mark the transaction and to mark the beginning and the end of the test as well. And so any tool, you know, JMeter, LoadRunner can be used for the same purpose, just not as easily as predefined sections in Neoload.
Okay, great. We've got another one. Basically, make sure that I'm understanding the question correctly here. It's are these tools useful for mobile apps performance testing as well?
I'll take this one as well, Todd. So of course they are. Majority of our applications are running today on mobile platforms, not only, especially customer-facing ones, not only on regular desktops. They're available in all forms, of course, on mobile phones, on tablets, on multiple mobile devices, even if we're talking about service devices such as scanners, you know, UPS, FedEx, et cetera, So they're definitely useful in those because they're tested in a similar way and can be run, you know, simulate mobile transactions because they're going towards the server anyway. So from the perspective of performance, the difference in instrumenting the mobile performance test is maybe minimal, but the results assessment is a little bit different. As I mentioned before, mobile users are significantly less patient and have significantly less time to wait for the transactions to complete. So, but yeah, to answer the question, yes, of course, they can be used and they're very useful. Same way they're useful for regular application testing.
Yeah, and something else that I would add around AppDynamics is that you they do have their end user monitoring section, which allows you to be able to see if you're testing a web browser, what's happening on the end user, how long the page is taking to load, which is what we're doing in performance testing. So that's something you could actually monitor and see what the real time what it's looking like as the page loads, the DOM load, for spike time, all that information's there, as well as with mobile. So you can instrument mobile as well, and it can tell you, what requests are happening, if there are any crashes, from what area, and be able to give you some deep dive diagnostics as well on that for both mobile and also IoT. So if you have an IoT device, you can instrument AppDynamics with that as well.
Okay.
I think we have one more.
Yeah, we've got one more, and I think this might be more towards Darby and your AppDynamics expertise. The question is there any way to set up a threshold for transaction response time so that we can get the alert from AppDynamics?
Is there a way to set up threshold transaction response time? So basically the way it works is that AppDynamics alerts on when a baseline is violated. Okay, that's when you get an alert. A baseline is different than a threshold. So if you have a for thresholds, that's what you see, the yellow and the orange and the purple. Okay, that's just by you going and looking. Now you can create an event. Well, slow thresholds create an event, and you can alert on those events inside your policies. It'll say, do you want to alert on health rules, or do you want to alert on these other events that AppDynamics creates? And AppDynamics creates that slow and very slow event for the business transactions. So you can say, okay, I want to alert if it's very slow or slow, and then you will get alerts based on thresholds.
And I think I can add to that a little bit. So there's definitely a threshold for transaction response time to set up within the load tool itself. It's called SLA. So pretty much any load tool will have an ability to set up SLA-based tests where you can say, well, if this transaction goes over 5 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, or whatever it is you will put in as a threshold value, it will mark it as failed. And if your test, you can also set up the test. So if your test is set up to run, let's say, an hour or 3 hours, and you get the SLA violations more than 1% or 3 times or whatever value that you want at the beginning of the test will stop. So that way you don't waste your valuable resources that are set up and allocated for testing purposes themselves. And you can provide results to the developers and to the application owners much earlier. So even, if you can save 50 minutes out of an hour, you saved a lot of resources and a lot of time, and can go back to resetting the test environment, fixing the bug that causes the slowdown. And you can also send that event to AppDynamics that will help you pinpoint why that happened. That would be the next step is, okay, we know that these transactions fail on the response time at a certain point, and we got to figure out why that happened. And thank you for the questions, of course.
Yeah.
Yes,
those are important.
Good questions. Good questions.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Give it one more second here. It doesn't look like it. So, obviously we are, okay, we've got one more. Do we need to configure an SLA in AppDynamics, or will it take it from Neoload? I think it's a follow-up.
Yes. So you will have to set up the SLA in AppD to let it know that what the threshold is. So if you know a threshold is, like I was saying earlier, like login is 3 seconds, and you know that if it goes over a specific threshold, you set up a threshold. instead of it being a dynamic. When you start out Dynamics out of the box, it's for slow transactions, it's basically takes data from the last 2 hours and says if it's more than 3 standard deviations over, then mark this transaction as slow. All right, but you can change that for it to be a static threshold and say, okay, instead of it being a dynamic rolling threshold, you say I want to be static and say 3,000 milliseconds for 3 seconds or whatever the case might be, and then you mark that specific transaction and say, okay, for this transaction I want it to be that, and now that transaction, if it goes over that threshold, will be marked as very slow, and then you can set up the alert for whenever you have, so if you have the events checked for slow and very slow, you'll know that it's slow through the emails that you get. You can be alerted by email. You can also be alerted by text, but email is probably the most popular thing. And you can also create remediation scripts. So let's say, for example, you are doing a test and you know that this specific error, when this happens, that the server's got to be bounced, right? So usually you would have to set that up with somebody and, you know, open tickets and all that kind of good stuff. But you can actually set up a remediation script that can reach out and touch that that server, and it can go and it can send out an alert and say to the SME or to the on-call or whatever, and say, you know, we're going to bounce this. Is that okay? And then he can just say yes or no, and then it'll bounce automatically. And he doesn't have to sign in and get to a computer and all that kind of good stuff. He can go out and be out with the kids and barbecuing and be able to help you during your testing. Or she, he or she.
Give it one more second, see if anything else trickles in, but I know we're coming up on time. And again, like we were saying earlier, you know, we are here and ready, willing, and able to answer any questions that come up in internal conversations as you guys go and digest this internally. So we're here to be a resource in any way that is most helpful. So thank you again for joining today's webinar. Again, it was recorded, and you guys will receive an email with a link once it's available. If there are any questions that we weren't able to address, we do have the record and we'll address them offline. So this concludes today's webinar, and thank you everybody for joining, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.